a second optical blast that blows the second sentinel's head from his body. Suddenly, Scott hears Storm's voice in his communicator. "We're outnumbered, Onu." Storm sounds as if she's coughing. "We can't last much longer." Scott hears this in horror, but continues to fight on. In the future, the mutants desperately try to use technology to keep track of each other's movements, but even this doesn't save them. As Scott turns around for a final optical blast, he notices that Jean has been captured. "Jean, you see how easily we penetrate your base. Your efforts are futile. You will never prevail," says the Sentinel. "Mutant, surrender, or she will meet a similar fate as him." "What? Oh no, God, no. Oh no, Beast." Scott notices that Beast is still laying nearly lifeless on the floor. Scott races toward Beast with all his might, but it is too late. The Sentinel raises his foot and comes down with a force like no other. We hear Beast tremble under the force of the mighty robot. His cry can be heard from a far distance. "Hank," Scott says. He is dead. Blood drips heavily from the Sentinel's foot. "You monster, how could you?" Scott says. "Surrender, mutant, or you and her will certainly meet the same fate. This is your final warning." Scott lets out a fury that may rival Logan's. "You monster." Scott unleashes a blast that shakes the very foundation of the building. The blast sends the Sentinel flying for miles. Jean soon falls to the ground, shaken up. "Jean, look at me. Are you all right?" "I am fine," Jean says. "Oh no, Hank." Scott and Jean walk towards Beast's dismembered remains. "It can't be. It just can't be." Jean turns her head in fear and rests it on Scott's chest as she cries. "You were one of my best friends. When I needed a friend, you were always there for me. You always helped me if I were in it. You would never hurt a flight, though you were misunderstood. You made up for it with your intelligence and wisdom. They'll always remember you, Hank." Scott says, "It's a shame you had to die for nothing." Scott desperately tries to answer his communicator. "Storm, we're coming. We're coming." But suddenly, his communicator goes dead. Scott suddenly drops the communicator on the ground, drops his arms, and looks to his left and sees Dale lying dead, and looks to his right and to his horror, sees Beast's dismembered remains. Days of future past in 2030 never ends. Scott almost begins to cry when he lifts up Jean's sad face, looks in her eyes, and says, "We have to find Logan." Jean shakes her head as she is still crying as they head off in search of where Logan has gone.